So the God of High School anime has come to an end, completing its first season with 13 episodes. Overall, the anime wasn't bad at all, even though it's receiving some mixed reviews by the fan base. To me, I felt the anime was too short with much content ripped out. Reading the manhwa ahead of the anime, there were some expected scenes and developments which did not make its way to the anime, and it's quite sad. I don't know why the anime was so short specifically. Maybe they didn't want to sacrifice quality for quantity. But even so, a 24 or 26 episode per season won't be bad at all, just like the GOAT's Attack on Titan. So let's talk about the first season of God of High School. And PS, spoiler warning, if you haven't watched it already, it has been over for some time, but if you don't care about spoilers, let's dive in. First off, God of High School is an anime which has a lot, and I mean a lot, of fight scenes. And watching how the anime is made and directed, you really appreciate the anime even more. But the amazing battles aside, story and character development could have gone a long way if they just added certain scenes they decided to omit or change entirely from the anime. The God of High School is a South Korean manhwa released as a webtoon and written and illustrated by Young Jae Park. The manhwa starts off with Jin Murray being recruited by R to join the God of High School tournament. Overconfident in his skills, Jin loses in seconds. Knowing this scene makes sense. Following the manhwa, you also see Handewi getting recruited and see a bit of his backstory and motivation. But even though his motivation is mostly the same, the anime removing certain scenes actually takes away some of his character traits like his loyalty and humility. In the next chapter, we see Mira and her strange love of strong men. Omitting this part is understandable, but we need to know the motivation of our three main characters so that we know what they are fighting for and why we need them to succeed. So the anime begins on the 4th chapter with Jin on his way to the tournament, meeting Yu, Mira, and helping out an old lady on the way. I prefer how the anime starts the tournament. For the most part, it was really entertaining, but unfortunately, it was also subject to certain things being removed and not making much sense. Here's what I mean. In the battle Handewi vs Bak Sen-sho, I felt this battle was a bit interesting because elements of the fight rippled into other upcoming fights. The anime makes Sang-sho to be the only one who cares about the logic of fighting. The battle was pretty quick, showing you the highlights of how the fight actually went down without wasting time animating any unnecessary scenes. In the manhwa, it gives you a bit of backstory of Sang-sho, why he carries the bat and how he attained enlightenment, balancing knowledge and brute force. So the fight is basically the same. The anime was true to the source material. Then this happens. Sang-sho copied Jimori's renewal taekwondo and he failed miserably. In the anime, the battle would have ended here, but the manhwa, Sang-sho refused to give up and decided to give it his all. But that was his all. How infuriating indeed. These little elements when reading the manhwa made this fight more enjoyable, so watching the anime produce a watered down version of it kinda sucked, in my opinion of course. I'm not going to be touching on every single difference between the manhwa and the anime, only some of the ones I care about and I personally feel should have been left in the anime. Renewal Taekwondo is kind of different in the anime. It's not a letdown or anything because it was probably due to the decision of the animators to make it different, but I feel the original one would have been a bit more appealing in my opinion. It had a bit more swag to it. Not to say it was completely removed, it still made its way to the anime, just slightly different. So there was this part where Jin frees one member of the 6, but in usual Crunchyroll fashion, his introduction was different. You ever wondered why Jimori had a sudden knowledge of acupuncture and started fighting using pressure points? Or Nabong Nido Ryu? Well, here's why. And maybe I wasn't paying attention, but I don't know why Park Mujin poisoned Jinmori. It's probably connected to the shade's pill Nabong used on Jin before his battle with Kyo. My guess is, in the anime, the sage pill was the fruits Jinmori received from Park Mujin as a test, I guess, to see if it was worth it. But they both had the same effect. Jinmori returned much stronger than before. Yo, they did my Brazilian Jujutsu boy dirty here. He never even had a chance.
Of course!
Yes, his fight with both Jinmori and Mira was short on both ends, but he did feel like a formidable foe. But he ended up being further.
Know your fucking place, trash!
He just used to progress the story. And it's a shame because I thought he was going to be one of those silent giants or something like Levi or Tachi or Hiei. Press F to pay respects to Beyond J. So Jinmori vs Handewi. At first it seemed like something that was really going to be very awesome. It didn't disappoint, but it really leaves you wanting more. I feel the pacing of the fights actually worried the show. Sometimes the show needs to breathe a little so that you can revel in the atmosphere of the battle rather than speeding it along. Some scenes need to be longer, some scenes needed to stay in the anime. There needed to be more pauses and even a discussion or two. Don't get me wrong, these scenes were still included in the anime, but it felt like they were rushing through it, so it didn't give enough time to sink in like other anime fights. After all this, including flashbacks, were all in one episode, whereas the manhwa was as long as 2 full rounds. Reading the manhwa with Sung Cho's commentary, we even learn new things about Jinmori's ability to come up with a counter move even after suffering through it once. Unlike the anime, the manhwa, we see Handewi train with Sung Cho before the battle. So while reading it, you might feel a sense of desperation and grit from Dewi, putting 110% not to lose that battle. The anime plays pretty much the same, with Dewi losing his will in the midst of battle, but compared to the manhwa, that feeling of desperation is lost. Not completely, but it's not as intense, because they rush through it. It's the little things, the little things that makes this battle worthwhile. Some other side characters were introduced during the latter part of the tournament, and I honestly feel they were done justice. Nearing the end of the tournament, you are introduced to Junpyo. I mean, Park Il-pyo and his team. Some of the matches were cut short, so here's what happened in the first match. Il-pyo, being an exceptional fighter as he is, gives a sort of tactic to help his teammates win easily. So, this being your first introduction to Il-pyo, you'll most likely be intrigued by him. Luckily, it was kept in the anime because it's one of those things that make Il-pyo special, among other things. So, the anime had drastically reduced the scenes where Jin was duped trying to save his grandfather. This part was very unnecessary because it was kind of a waste of time in my opinion, and the characters introduced didn't really add anything to the story. Its main purpose was to delay Jin yet again from arriving to the tournament. Good job to the directors for this part. Finally, the last thing I want to touch on, the fight with Jinmori vs Il-pyo. It was actually quite different. In the manhwa, it was Mira who won the fight, but in the anime, Jin won the fight through, means. I don't really prefer one to another because they both use the opportunity to establish something. Let's take the manhwa for example. After being kicked out of the ring by the newly awakened Il-pyo, Mira steps in to finish the fight. I was actually convinced that there was no way in hell that Mira could win the fight, but the author used this scene to develop Mira even further. Due to her previous losses and determination not to lose yet again, she fully awakened her chariot. Well, in the manhwa, Mira had lost some of her matches, and even though the odds were stacked against her, she didn't want to give up just yet. Luckily, her sword responded to her will, which granted her the power to give the finishing blow. So what do you know? Mira actually won the fight against Ilpio. Motherfucking Ilpio.
What the fuck what do you mean? How? How have you... Ah, man. What?
Whereas in the anime, it was in the fight against the conehead guy, and Jumori was the one to defeat Ilpio. In the anime, Jin finally awakened a strange power which we will finally come to learn about in the final episodes of the anime.